Today at the United States Air Force Museum from the Mary L. Cook Library Veterans History Project, speaking with Richard Miller. Richard, if you would begin by telling us your rank and where you served and so forth.
I was in the Navy. I was a pharmacist, mate, first class.
Okay, and what time period did you serve?
October 1942 to February 1945.
Were you the first person in your family to go into the service?
No.
Okay, you had other siblings?
And a brother about 6 months ahead of that.
Navy also?
Navy pharmacist, mate, too.
Okay. How did you become interested in the pharmacist program?
I was going to be a chiropractor when I come out, and I thought, oh, that'd be a great way to go through my pre-med training. And it was.
And was that voluntary, but then you had to test into the program, or?
No, they were delighted.
Okay.
They couldn't get volunteers into the hospital corps because it was a very dangerous job. It had the highest casualty rate of any service in the Navy hospital corps, or of all the Navy, because they went with the Marines on the landing parties.
So when you entered the service, tell us a little bit about the circumstances at the time, where you went.
You mean how I joined up
How
and
you
everything?
entered.
Yes. Well, at that time, 1942, it was still voluntary. You did not, you were not drafted, although the draft board was hanging over my head. So I went down and volunteered for it. It's in the book, incidentally. Kind of a traumatic entry, and I got rejected. They said that I had to go back and have a dilation, a urinary dilation. Extremely painful thing, very painful, which I did. Then after they did the dilation, I went back to the same man that had rejected me. I told him, I said, you wouldn't dare reject me now.
So then you were able to enter?
Yes, I entered in October of 1942.
And where did you do your basic?
Great Lakes.
And after there, you were sent to where?
I went to a hospital corps school there at Great Lakes, and then was sent to Bremerton Naval Hospital in Bremerton, Washington.
What kind of things did you do in that position?
Well, at first, of course, you're just a ward nurse, advanced commando, and then I switched to. I went through electrocardiograph training and became an electrocardiograph technician. I wanted to go into X-ray because we use X-ray in my future work in chiropractic, but they were filled up, so it probably saved my life because at that time there was a lot of radiation from the old X-ray machines. And those guys that did that work, a lot of them have developed cancer from it.
And then how long did that training last? Your electrocardiogram, was that a short-term thing?
That was 16 weeks, and that was at Oakland, California, Oakland Naval Hospital.
And then where were you sent after that?
Then I took a test to go to officer training, B-12 program. But before I could get into that, they assigned me to the battleship Wisconsin as an electrocardiograph technician. For me to run it. It was a new ship just being built. So it was, we had to go to Rhode Island, Newport, Rhode Island. And while I was at Newport waiting to go on the Wisconsin, I was assigned to Yale University pre-med training.
And then after you began that training, what happened?
Well, I went through there for 6 months, and then they decided that they had way too many pre-med students. That's when I was in pre-med. And there was 80 of us started, and only one man got through.
Mm-hmm.
he didn't go into medicine either. The one man that did get through. It was an extremely difficult program. The dean of the college told us when we came in, he said, the Navy seems to think you can take all these courses. He said, we don't think you can. So he said, if you do, I want to shake your hand. So, okay. So then I was sent to New York, Pier 92, which is a station where you get assigned to a new station. I was leaving the V-12 program. And at that point, I was assigned to a destroyer, USS Rowan, DD-782. We went to Norfolk to train, or to go on a ship. The ship was built at Bremerton, or at Seattle, Washington. So we spent, I guess about 4 months there at Norfolk, at which time I developed severe hepatitis. And I was quite sick. Lost 40 pounds. Didn't eat for 2 weeks. And finally they came running over one day and they said, the crew is leaving for Bremerton to get the new ship. And I said, well, I've got to go with you. I want that ship. That was prime duty for a pharmacist to get on a destroyer, because you were the boss. So I was still sick with hepatitis, and the doctor said, what is your test score for hepatitis? I said, well, I haven't had it taken recently. It's supposed to be 105 if you're normal. And mine got up to 140. And I went up and had it tested for the doctor. I said, I got to go with that ship. And he said, well, what's it read now? And it says 118. I crossed the 1 out and put a 0 in there. Kind of cheap. But I got through with it. And he said, well, I know you've lied to me, but go ahead anyhow. So,
so you got to go out when they left?
Yes, we went on the train, and in the book I told you there, first night we left, it was snowing, it was the middle of the winter, and they woke me up at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was the only medical man aboard the train, and a woman was having a baby. And they says, come back and deliver the baby. I said, I don't know anything about delivering babies. So I said, do you have a telegraph aboard the train? He said, yeah. And I said, well, you stop this train, get this woman off here. I don't want to deliver a baby.
So you didn't have to?
No.
Did your train go coast to coast then?
Yeah, it was a 5-day trip.
Did you go through North Platte where the TNT was?
Absolutely.
Did you get off?
Oh, sure. You got a pheasant dinner.
Oh, great. So how long was your stop over there? 15, 20 minutes? Or?
Yeah, just long enough. They knew he was going to get a sandwich. It was a very unusual thing for those people to do. They were quite famous for that.
Yes. There's been a book written about that.
Yes.
I was just curious about your time there. When your train stopped, everybody just ran off and went in and got the food, and they had people there to talk with you, and then you just boarded again.
We had one in Ohio too, incidentally.
Oh, really? Where was that?
It was over in eastern Ohio, but it was the same thing. They would come aboard and give you a sandwich. What the devil town was that? Zanesville?
Oh.
I forget exactly what town it was, but they did have an almost identical situation for the servicemen.
I hadn't heard of that one.
Oh yeah, it was good.
Oh. So then you finally got out there after about 5 days, you said?
Yes.
And then what was the procedure as far as getting ready to go to sea?
Well, the ship was still being built. They had just laid the keel, and we had, since I was a head of a department, so I had to make sure that that I'd be ready to go. I had all the supplies on board. It was about, they built the ship in 30 days from the bottom of the ship to the top. It takes 4 years in peacetime. That's how good they were in World War II. And there was women and old men. Marvelous.
Civilians. Did,
Yeah.
when you went out on a destroyer, did you have a certain length of time that you were assigned, or how did that work?
Oh, you went on until the war was over.
Okay.
You know, there was no question of how long he was going to be there.
And then did you just dock at different places to resupply?
Oh, yeah.
And then, so how long would it be when you would go out until you would come up upon somewhere and reload? How long was that? Several months?
Yeah, several months, sure. Yeah. You went to Pearl Harbor first, which was, they wanted to stock the ship there with food because once you got out to the war zone, there was no fresh food of any sort. And you didn't eat very well. Dehydrated food, oh, it was terrible.
It's sort of like the sea rations, or were they sea rations?
No, not sea rations, but it was all, we called it ersatz, or fake. Potatoes, milk, or anything like that. You can get any of that. They would have canned milk, which was very good. We ate very well when we were supplied, extremely well. But if you weren't supplied, that only happened when you left Hawaii. It was the last time you ate well, until we came back.
And the purpose of the destroyer is what?
They are the mainly submarine patrollers. They do shore battery bombardments, and they're extremely fast, and they're anti-submarine. They can detect submarine. None of the other ships can. They're very fast. They go around 45 miles an hour. And they were also assigned to pick up when an airplane crashed off of a carrier, we had to fish them out of the water. So it was called bird dogging. You stayed behind a carrier and waited for planes to crash, which was quite awful.
And about how many personnel were on the destroyer?
400.
400. And you were in charge, you said, at the department. Now, what was your responsibility as far as that goes?
Their health and welfare.
Of everyone on the
Oh,
ship?
yeah. We had a medical doctor for the first 5 months, but the minute the war ended, they took him off, and I still remained in charge for the next 6 months. In fact, all the responsibility falls on it's amazing what they put on. You're trained as actually to be a nurse, but we had to do surgery, any surgery that come up. There's all sorts of stories about what the pharmacist mates did on submarines. They'd operate for appendicitis and everything. It was amazing what they did. And I had an appendicitis case aboard the ship. And of all things, on the one time that in our history of our ship, we had 2 medical doctors as passengers. And they had to operate in the middle of a storm. It was a very hairy situation medically.
And were you trained to do those emergency procedures, or?
You had to learn it.
Had to learn?
Yeah. No, you weren't trained specifically to do surgeries, but you had training books that told you what to do. And most of the time, doctors were not available. You were it. It's kind of scary for a young kid. I was only 19.
What type of things did you run into on a daily basis?
Well, I mean, it was a pretty healthy crew. You know, there are 400 men, and they're the cream of the crop, really. they don't go to sea unless they're in good health. But you had disease, we had all sorts of food poisonings, and an outbreak of dysentery. That's a hairy situation too. What else did we have? Mostly I had minor surgeries. I had one man had all of his fingers cut off, and fortunately we were in the harbor, and I was able to get him over. They saved his fingers, but they were cut off completely. The hospital ship was right next to us. That was very fortunate for that kid.
If someone was seriously injured, did they try to transfer them to hospital ships or?
Yeah,
or
if
to
they
land
could,
base?
but it was very rare that you were near a hospital ship. So we hoped and prayed there wouldn't be. We had one compound dislocation of an arm, which scared the daylights out of me. The bones went almost sticking out of the skin. They went off in all directions. We were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We stopped. I had 3 other pharmacist mates come over to help me. And we really didn't know how to set that. So we radioed to Pearl Harbor, and they said, well, you'll have to anesthetize him. We said, well, how do we anesthetize him? They said, you get him drunk. So we did. We fed him whiskey until he got drunk. He didn't know what was going on. And we set it, and it went back perfectly. So it was very...
Did they kind of talk you through it on the radio?
Yes. Told us exactly what to do. He was anesthetized to the point where he didn't fight us at all.
Was that one of the more serious ones that you had?
Yes, the appendicitis would have been the most serious. But fortunately, these 2 doctors were aboard, and they did operate at sea in a storm. We had the ship, the destroyers they roll and buck and pitch an awful lot. They're not very stable. So I had to hold on to the surgeon to keep him from falling over. It was kind of a scary experience too.
What's the size of a destroyer? About how big are they?
It's 400 feet long, which is about a foot for every man on board. They're very crowded. So they sleep 4 deep. You're in bunks that have chains holding you up. If you turn over in the night, you hit the man above you.
Pretty crowded.
Yes, it is.
Were there levels on the? How many levels in the ship? Was there like a mechanics level and a?
Well, yeah, there's the engine level. There are five separate decks.
And then, as far as the other people on board, were they just mainly on like watches? Because you said that they did rescue people and.
Oh yes.
Okay.
So they're on watches 4 hours on and 8 hours off. Now we didn't have to do that in the medical department. They had some very nasty jobs aboard, which we were always exempt from. They didn't like that too well.
Now, did you travel in a group? In a group of ships?
Not always. Most of the times, I guess about half the time, you were with a convoy of some sort. You were with Navy battleships, cruisers, and aircraft carriers. And you cannot take that fleet out without destroyers because they protect you from submarines. The bigger ships don't have any anti-submarine protection.
So they would be out on the perimeter then?
Oh, yeah, we'd go around and we were a lot faster than they were. We'd kind of circle around like a bunch of dogs.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you entered the service, were you married or single?
No, no,
Single. So, did you marry after you got out of the service?
Let's see. That was about 10 years afterwards.
Okay. And then, as far as the people that you served with, have you been able to keep in contact with any of those?
We have reunions
Do you?
pretty regular.
Okay.
Although we didn't have one for 50 years, for some unknown reason, they just didn't have them. So they said we was going to meet in San Diego, and I said, well, I won't know anybody after 50 years. My memory's bad enough. And I walked in, and they all stood up, and they said, Doc Miller. I said, how'd you know me? Well, it was easy. You're the guy that gave us the shots. And I said, well, drop your pants and bend over and I'll recognize you right away.
So now, as you completed your time in the service, and you stayed in that general area for the whole period that you were in, or did you move
I
around?
stayed, well, I was in this, it was all in the South Pacific, Japan, and we were in the occupation of Japan when the war ended.
Okay. And then, so you were out at sea when the bombing happened?
Yes, we were ready to attack Japan. We were going to make a landing there. I think it was called the Olympic, I think that's the name of it. And we were going to lose 1 million men in the process. It was very scary, very scary. But they dropped the bombs, and the first one they didn't react to it. The second one they'd had enough.
And did you get word of that by radio?
Yeah, we didn't know what the atomic bombs were, though. We had no idea. All we knew was that it was very, very powerful. That's all. We didn't know about radiation. And then, when the war ended, we were the very first ones to go to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I was there within 30 days after the bomb went off, both of them. And we were the first. It took them that long to get the treaty signed, and they had to get the prisoners released. But I understand we were the first group to go aboard or go on the site of Hiroshima.
What did you see when you got there?
Total destruction. So,
Was anything standing? You got out far enough, probably.
most of the concrete and steel buildings did survive. Of course, they were gutted out and everything. The Japanese lived in very flimsy paper, cardboard houses and wood, and they were virtually burned to the ground. And strangely enough, the atom bomb blast did not look much worse than the conventional firebombing that they had done before that, because that would burn all the city up. So they were very, very flammable, their cities were. Now, the atom bombs sites was, there was buildings left standing. Of course, the wind is knocked out. Because we went into, I was in the first landing party, and we went into a bank. We took money as souvenirs, which I still have, and we found, sailors do this, we found a brewery, which was loaded with beer. And we got pretty well snockered up.
Were you able to see any of the local people? Were they out of the area?
No, what few were there did not talk to us, so they were scared of us. They were very frightened of us. They had been through some horrifying bombing. Finally, we did, later on, I did get to talk to the Japanese, even eat dinner in their homes. After the war was over, possibly 3 to 4 months later, I sat down and talked to them. They were beaten people by that. We didn't know if they were going to surrender completely, or they were going to do some last-ditch fighting. And we were very frightened of the fact that they might lure us in and then let us have it if they didn't. And when we came into Japan, they had huge guns pointing on this. It's a very mountainous region. You're going between mountains, deep channels, and there was big guns pointing down at us, which was very scary. When the war was over, we found out those weren't guns; they were telephone poles. They had faked them to make them look like guns, just to scare us. From aerial, they knew we were doing aerial surveys, and we could see those guns down there. They weren't guns at all; telephone poles.
Well, now, what was your mission when you came in with the landing crew there?
Well, my job was to go with the crew, and I was supposed to check the radiation, but we didn't know what radiation was, and we didn't have the Geiger counters. But we didn't know how dangerous radiation was. And within 30, I think it was about 28 days after the bomb blast, I don't know if I was radiated or not, but I've had 5 kids since. I'm 80 years old, but at night, if you turn the lights out, my eyes glow with radiation. But no, I don't think that was my job, was supposed to be to check for radiation, to see what the dangers were, but we knew so little about it.
How were you supposed to go about that, since you didn't know?
They didn't tell us. Typical.
Just know.
Just know, yeah. Are they sick? Anybody turning green or anything?
And so you stayed there for several months, you said?
I stayed there from the war's end, was in September. It ended in August. We were there about 28 days later. We stayed there till January in Japan.
And then after that, were you sent home?
Yes, we sailed back in January, and they immediately sent us back for discharge.
And so you acted, as you said, as an occupation force?
Yes, we had, our job was to deliver mail to all the occupying forces. We would carry, the whole ship would be covered with mail bags, and we would deliver them to the Army, Navy, whoever was occupying the cities. And, we would sail around. We got to visit many cities that way. And I wanted to see those cities too, see what they were. And strangely enough, the atomic bomb damage was almost identical to the firebombing that we had done before the end. We literally burned the cities to the ground. No wonder they surrendered. Didn't have any place else to live after.
And all that took place, how, was that just an ongoing thing throughout the war? Or how long of a time period was that firebombing?
Well, it's only about in the last year that we had to occupy airfields to get the B-29. The B-29 was a new bomber. It was never used in Europe at all. And so the bombing, I would say, went on from probably around 1945, Christmas. Although we would put up 800 bombers on a single mission. That's an awful lot of airplanes. We had to build the airfields, supply the things, the bombs, and everything. It was quite a feat. Very impressive. It's no wonder the Jeffs surrendered. We just sank all their ships. They couldn't send out for supplies or anything. Very. We simply had too many men and too much armament. That's all there was to it.
Do you feel, I know that the general feeling is that the war would have gone on for quite a bit longer had not that bombing happened. you agree with that sentiment?
Not only, I couldn't stand Truman when he first became president. I didn't think he was equal of Roosevelt. He dropped the bomb, and it was his decision alone. That's a terrible decision to make. Later on, after the war, I shook hands with him. I just said, thanks. Because, you know, literally, that saved my life. I probably wouldn't have made it. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Absolutely. I have no, we killed, I think, 140,000 innocent people. But we didn't start the war. They did. So,
After you came back from the war, how was your adjustment into civilian life? Did that go pretty smoothly?
yeah, very smooth. I had no problems. I had to go to, I was going to go through chiropractic training then. I worked a year afterwards, but I didn't leave any scars on me. And of course, I didn't get into any heavy combat, which might have changed my attitude completely. And I know quite a few of the guys did have disturbing things after the war, and I understand them too. But I didn't go through the combat. It must have been horrifying, very best. The man I went in with, two of us went in together from my neighborhood. He had 2 ships shot out from underneath him. He was in the water for 6 hours, and he couldn't swim. Life jacket. So, you know, those guys. My book says that I'm an unblooded warrior, and I was that too. Our ship seemed to be everywhere but where the combat was. So, I know part of the war record, people want to hear what sort of combat did you see. Well, I think out of there was 15 million servicemen, and less than 15% ever was in actual combat. Less than 15%.
But it takes a whole lot of people to move an army or a navy or a whole lot.
Yes, it does. And those poor guys that were in the Marines, occupying those islands, infantrymen in Europe, well, it was horrifying. And the 8th Air Force bombed, 1 out of 3 men was killed or captured bombing Germany. That's a terrible record. 1 out of 3. I felt for him.
What events do you recall that you would like to share about your time in the service?
Yep. We sailed into 2 typhoons, which were terrifying at best, 140-mile-an-hour winds. And I was a young fellow, and I was looking for excitement. It didn't bother me any. We was in one storm right off of Japan, just as the war was ending. And 1,600 sailors were drowned when their ships turned over in that same storm, on the same type of ships that I was on. 1,600. There was no chance to save any. So both of those typhoons were very, very scary. But I was young and full of feet and vigor, and I thought it was very exciting until I found out how many men were killed. I thought that was, I didn't have kamikaze planes hit our ship or even threaten us. I was very fortunate. extremely fortunate. But there was a lot of excitement. There was excitement. We had to fish those airmen out of the water. That was very scary for them. Sometimes we just barely got to them. Sometimes the sailors aren't awarded as much courage as the infantrymen that are fighting, face to face with the enemy. But we also, with the destroyers, we faced. We lost one destroyer every day for 30 straight days. 400 men on each ship. That was very dangerous. We was out there to replace those men, and it so happened I didn't get there quite in time. But I knew it was dangerous where we were going, very dangerous.
Overall, did you feel that your experience was a positive event in your life?
Yes, very much so. I knew what I was going to do afterwards. This was excellent training. It was an internship, is what it was. As I say, I was solely responsible for these guys, and I had to literally diagnose and treat. I had all the medical equipment, all the surgical supplies to do anything I wanted to do. And that's a superb training.
And when you got out, you went on and did what in civilian life?
Well, I worked a year to get enough money to go to school. Then I went into chiropractic college, which I had been in before the war started. And that's 4 years. So I took my training. And I was way ahead of all the other students since I had had all this Navy experience. It was wonderful. Excellent training. At the best of books and training for different emergencies. It was a great. I didn't want to go into my chiropractic college right out of high school because you're not too bright at that age. 4 years in the Navy made a different man of me.
So you went on and became a chiropractor?
Yes.
And did that lifelong then?
53 years.
In what area did you work?
Right here.
Right here.
Right at Dayton.
And is there anything that we skipped over that you would like to add to the interview?
Well, I have the whole book. There was all sorts of excitement went on there. I wrote the whole book because I thought there was an awful lot happened. I don't know if there was anything real dramatic. I was at Yale University when my sister had died with cancer, and I had to leave school and go home with the family. And it probably cost me my degree from Harvard or from Yale. So I regretted that sincerely. I would have loved to have a Yale diploma. But they told me when I had to go home to the funeral, they said, "No, you can stay here, and there's nothing you can do for your sister. She's dead." But I didn't feel my place was. I had to be home. So that hurt me very much. Unfortunately, I don't know where the whole time went. It was almost, not quite 4 years, 3 years and 9 months, I believe. But I don't know where all that time went to. I was on board the ship for a full year. And I loved that. It was great. Like being on your own cruise ship. I was very excited about going on board, and when I got there, it was everything I thought it was going to be.
Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Not right now. If whoever gets this reads the book I presented with it, tells the whole story. It's 140 pages long, so there's a lot of information in there. So if they want to.
And just for the record, what's the title of your book?
Diary of an Unblooded Warrior.
Okay. And I guess just in closing, if there's anything that you would like to be put on record as saying, or anything that we have not mentioned.
Just the fact that the bombs were necessary. I approve of them 100%. Open the book up there to page 105. There's a very, very funny story that goes with this. I think it's 105. Is it? Is my picture there?
Yes.
That's only a page and a half long, but it's, they wanted a funny story, so. The captain of the ship, when it was being built, he come in to me and he says, are you Miller, the pharmacist's mate? I said, yes, sir. I'd never met him. He was a huge man, 6'4", 270 pounds. He says, I had stomach trouble for years and finally found a doctor that cured it with a magic pink medicine. He said, I want you to find out what that medicine was. Well, there's only one pink medicine. So he says, if you can find that for me, he says, I'll make you ship's photographer so that you're not allowed to have a camera aboard ship. You know, but the ship's photographer is, he says, I'll let you run the camera since you're a pharmacist's mate. You're not working all the time. So I did. I got the cameras, and strangely enough, when I got out of the Navy, I was quite a photographer. I knew what I was doing. And I got a job with a newspaper and worked my way all the way through college as a news photographer.
Which newspaper?
Indianapolis Star.
Okay.
I still do an enormous amount of photography just for the fun of it. I don't do it for a job anymore. But it all came from my Navy experience and giving that guy some stomach medicine.
Okay, well, unless you have anything else you'd like to add, we'll just stop or.
Well, I would be delighted to have my book in the Library of Congress. I don't know if I'm qualified or not.
Okay.
I didn't see a lot of combat, but it was a very exciting experience. I felt like it changed me from a boy to
Thank you.
okay.
Thank you very much. Let me turn this off.
He talks a lot, doesn't he?
Thank you very much, sir. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Okay. This is, they said they wanted pictures. I don't know if they,
What we can do is we can scan those.
can you scan them?
Yes.
There was, there's the big man with the stomach trouble. Wait, he was an enormous man. He was a tackle for Alabama football team. That's the ship I was on.
There it is in the road.
Yeah, USS Rowan. And the fact that's it on the cover of that book.
Oh, okay.
There we are.
That's one of your typhoons.
Yeah, that's right. That's what it is. But there's Harry. I got him in my book.
Got Harry.
God bless him. So I don't know if they can use any of those pictures.
Okay. Let me take those, if you don't mind, I'll take it back and see what we can get scanned in.
Oh, God, there's a lot of them in there.
We probably just get a sampling of them.
All right.